Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Let me introduce myself first. My name is Jonathan Daniharjo from Bunda Mulia University. In this opportunity, I'd like to share with you my research findings on sentence fragments in the Indonesian EFL Students Writings. It is a fact that we speak more than we write. In speaking, we don't really pay attention to the structure, but the message itself. In other words, we use simple language for communicative purposes. However, in writing, there are rules to follow to make a good writing. Writing is a medium of human communication that requires some important aspects to pay attention to. According to Berman et al. In 2008, there are 6 aspects of writing: ideas and content development, organization, voice, word choice, fluency, and convention. Ideas and content development refer to how the idea is relevant and appealing. Organization refers to logical sequence of events, a clear ending, and ordering of ideas within paragraphs. Voice refers to the taking of a perspective in a narrative, which can be coded in 3 ways: voice as guide, voice as message, and voice as perspective. Word choice refers to the use of vocabulary which demonstrates a sound knowledge of subtle differences between words and avoidance of repetition. Fluency deals with students' ability to write with a natural flow and rhythm. And the last one, convention, deals with punctuation, capitalization, and a sentence structure. Since there are so many things to pay attention to in a writing, this study is limited to only conventions, namely punctuation, capitalization, and sentence structure in relation to sentence fragments. In this study, I formulated only one question, that is, what kind of sentence fragments taking place the most in the students' writings? The medium to measure the students' ability was a free composition with 150 words as the minimum. The topic itself was taken from the TOEFL test. The topic was some people prefer to eat at food stands or restaurants, and others prefer to prepare and eat their food at home. Which they prefer? The reason why I took this topic was that this topic was relatively easy and the students were expected to communicate their ideas as much as possible. The participants in this study were 35 students of non-English departments coming from several majors at Bunda Mulia University, and all the respondents were first semester students taking general English course. What is a sentence fragment? According to Langen and Goldstein, a fragment is less than a sentence and it lacks a subject or a verb or both, and it does not express a complete thought. Similarly, Panther defines a sentence fragment as a fragment that lacks at least one of the 3 features of a complete sentence, namely a subject, a verb, or a complete thought. In other words, a fragment is an incomplete sentence and thus it cannot stand by itself. Langen and Goldstein categorize fragments into 5 different types: dependent word, ing and to, add a detail, missing subject, and missing verb fragments. The first one, dependent word fragments, happens when sentences start with the use of subordinating conjunctions like although, because, before, after, and so on. The second one, ing and to fragments, happens when ing and to appear at or near beginning of a word group. The third one, in added detail fragments, they happen when a writer would like to give extra information to give a detail. and the verb is generally missing. The fourth one, missing subject fragments are fragments where the sentence do have a verb but it lacks a subject. And the last one, missing verb fragments are fragments that occur as a result of missing a main verb in its sentence. To find out the fragmented sentences in the students' writings, I had 3 steps. The first one, I saw the students' complete thought first and saw the following sentences. The second one, I saw whether the students used correct punctuations like a comma or a period to show the correlation between sentences. The third one, I saw whether the sentences had a subject and a predicate and had a main clause. After that, I categorized the fragmented sentences into 6 categories: dependent word, into fragments, added detail, missing subject, missing verb, and missing subject and verb fragments. The findings show there are 5 occurrences in dependent word fragments category. The fragments came from the use of subordinating conjunctions like although, as, and because that began the sentence. Let's have a look at the example of what the students had here. In the original version, the student had 2 different sentences while in fact they actually needed only 1 sentence. So I gave a suggested revision by combining those sentences into one effective sentence and putting a comma. In and to fragments, there are 6 occurrences. The fragmented sentences resulted from 2 different causes. The first one, verb ing to replace the main verbs. The second one, verb ing as a present participle without the main clause. Let's see example 2. The student had 2 different tenses in one sentence. He had present tense as well as a present continuous tense. That's why I gave a revision by changing the verb cooking and serving into present tense. And in example 3, the student had 2 different sentences. In fact, they are actually relevant. That's why I gave a revision by putting a comma and combining those 2 sentences into one effective sentence. In added detail fragments category, I found only 2 occurrences. The fragments came from giving examples in different sentences. Let's example 4. The student had 2 different sentences. And then in the example, he didn't give a subject but only a verb. That's why I gave 2 kinds of revision by combining the first and the second sentence and having a comma, and the second one putting them into 2 different sentences, but of course with a subject and a verb. In missing subject fragments category, there are 11 occurrences. The fragments came from 3 different causes. The first one, the use of a verb in the place of a gerund as a subject. The second one, the absence of a subject in a compound sentence. The third one, the use of prepositional phrase to serve as a subject. Let's example 5. In the original version, the student had a verb as a subject. In English, putting a verb as a subject has to be in gerund form. That's why I gave a revision by changing the verb eat into eating. Next, in example 6, it is actually a compound sentence with 2 clauses. In the first clause, the students did not forget to have a gerund as a subject, but in the second one, he failed to have a subject as well as a verb. That's why I change it by having a subject and a verb in the second clause. In example 7, there was no subject at all, and I gave her a vision by having French food as a subject and smells as a verb. The most errors took place in these missing verb fragments, as there were 15 occurrences. The fragments came from no auxiliary verb and no main verb in the sentence. In example 8, the student failed to have to be in the sentence. I then gave a revision by having is and having be to modify a notative. In example 9, the student only had a dependent clause in a sentence. To correct this mistake, I gave 2 ways to revise it. The first one is to have a main clause, and the second one to have a verb. In this last category, there are 5 occurrences. The fragments came from the absence of dummy subjects like it and there for sentences that do not have subjects. In example 11, it is a complex sentence where there have to be 2 clauses. Since it and there do not carry meaning in Indonesian, the students might have failed because of it. In these unexpected findings, even though they might not be regarded as sentence fragments, I found these sentences incomplete because of the fact that there are many independent clauses with coordinating conjunctions to begin the sentences. And there are 30 occurrences. Let's have a look at the example here. In the original version, the student had 2 different sentences with a coordinating conjunction but to connect those sentences. And I gave a revision by having them combined all together and having a comma. To answer this question, based on the findings, the most fragmented sentences happened to be in the missing verb fragment category, and the least one is in the added detail fragment category. And also, it appears that the major cause of such sentences to occur was the spoken language. Thank you. This is the end of my presentation.